85-year-old George was taking his last breath in the hospital when all he wanted was to say goodbye to his cat Whiskers. The nurses allowed the cat to be brought to the hospital. George closed his eyes while holding Whiskers' paw. But what happened 24 hours later would shock the entire hospital staff and reveal Whiskers' true power. George Patterson was 85 years old, a retired teacher who had taught mathematics at Oak Valley High School for 40 years. After losing his wife Margaret 10 years earlier, his only companion in life was his cat, Whiskers. Whiskers was 12 years old, a gray and white cat with green eyes. George had found him 7 years ago, injured on the street, and brought him home. Since that day, they had become an inseparable duo. George's daily routine revolved around Whiskers. Every morning at 6 a.m., he would wake up and prepare breakfast for Whiskers. Then they would sit together in the garden, George reading the newspaper while Whiskers basked in the sun. "You're my best friend, Whiskers," George would tell his cat every morning. "After losing Margaret, you gave me a reason to live." Whiskers was deeply attached to George as well. Wherever George went, the cat would follow. When George watched television, Whiskers would sleep in his lap. At night, he would sleep at the foot of George's bed. The neighbors were amazed by the bond between George and Whiskers. "It's like they understand each other," neighbor Helen would say. When George talks, Whiskers meows back as if he's answering. As George aged, his health problems began to increase. Heart problems, diabetes, high blood pressure. But Whiskers was always by his side. When George was sick, Whiskers never left his side. George had no children, no close relatives except for a distant niece who lived across the country. Margaret and he had tried to have children but were never blessed with any. Whiskers had filled that void in ways George never expected. The bond between them was extraordinary. George would talk to Whiskers about everything, his memories of teaching, stories about Margaret, his fears about growing old alone. And somehow, Whiskers always seemed to listen with those intelligent green eyes, responding with soft meows or purrs at just the right moments. "People think I'm crazy for talking to a cat," George would tell Helen. "But Whiskers understands me better than most people ever did." Their routine was sacred to both of them. George would wake up first, but he never had to call Whiskers for breakfast. The cat would appear in the kitchen at exactly 6:05 a.m., as if he had an internal clock. After breakfast, they'd sit on the front porch, George with his coffee and newspaper, Whiskers perched on the porch railing, surveying their small domain. In the last 6 months, George's condition had rapidly deteriorated. His heart failure had progressed, and he began having difficulty breathing. His doctor, Dr. Hamilton, told George he needed to be hospitalized. "George, your heart is very weak. You need to be monitored in the hospital," Dr. Hamilton explained during what would be their final office visit. George was devastated. "But I have Whiskers. He can't live without me. Your neighbor Helen can take care of him. This is temporary." George reluctantly agreed. He entrusted Whiskers to Helen and was admitted to Riverside Hospital. This was the first time they had been separated for such a long period. On the first night in the hospital, George couldn't sleep at all. He kept thinking about Whiskers. "Is he wondering where I am?" he asked himself repeatedly. Helen called George every day to report on Whiskers' condition. "Whiskers isn't eating, George. He keeps looking for you. He's waiting by the door." This news upset George greatly. Knowing that Whiskers was as sad as he was affected him even more. 3 days later, George's condition worsened significantly. He had a heart attack and was taken to the intensive care unit. The doctors told Helen, his emergency contact, that the situation was serious. "George's time may have come," Dr. Hamilton said. "You should be prepared." During this time, Whiskers' behavior at Helen's house became increasingly concerning. The cat refused all food and water. He would sit by Helen's front door for hours, occasionally letting out long, mournful meows that broke Helen's heart. "It's like he knows something terrible is happening," Helen told Dr. Hamilton when she called for updates on George's condition. The veterinarian, Dr. Ross, confirmed Helen's fears when she brought Whiskers in for a checkup. "This cat is grieving," he said. "Animals can sense when their beloved humans are in distress, even from a distance. If George doesn't recover, Whiskers may not survive either." This was not uncommon in elderly pets who had strong bonds with their owners. Dr. Ross had seen cases where animals literally died of broken hearts after losing their companions. George remained in intensive care for 1 week. During this time, Whiskers ate nothing. Helen became very worried and took him to the veterinarian. "Whiskers is depressed," said veterinarian Dr. Ross. "He misses his owner very much. If George doesn't return, Whiskers might also become ill." Helen shared this situation with Nurse Susan at the hospital. Susan had been caring for George for a week and knew how much he missed Whiskers. "George constantly talks about Whiskers," Susan said. "Maybe if he sees his cat, he'll feel a little better." Dr. Hamilton was initially hesitant. Pet visits are prohibited in the hospital. There's a risk of infection. But George's condition was very poor. These might be his last days. Susan suggested we could fulfill George's final wish. Finally, Dr. Hamilton gave permission. Just for a few minutes. And the cat must have a health check. Helen immediately took Whiskers to the veterinarian. Dr. Ross confirmed that the cat was healthy despite not eating. "Whiskers is clean. He can be taken to the hospital." The decision to allow Whiskers into the ICU was unprecedented at Riverside Hospital. Dr. Hamilton had to get special permission from the hospital administration, explaining the extraordinary circumstances. "This is highly irregular," said hospital administrator Dr. Patricia Mills. "But if it provides comfort to a dying patient, we can make an exception." Special protocols were put in place. Whiskers would need to be in a carrier, would only be allowed in George's room, and the visit would be limited to 30 minutes. The room would need to be sanitized afterward. That evening, Helen brought Whiskers to the hospital in a special carrier. The cat had been quiet during the car ride, as if sensing the gravity of the situation. Susan escorted them to the intensive care unit, where other nurses and even some doctors had gathered, curious about this unusual visit. George lay in his bed, very weakened. He was connected to a breathing apparatus, but his consciousness was clear. When Helen and Susan brought Whiskers inside, George's eyes filled with tears. "Whiskers!" George whispered. As soon as Whiskers saw George, he became excited. He immediately jumped onto George's bed. Normally this was forbidden, but the nurses overlooked it for that moment. Whiskers lay down next to George and rested his head on George's chest. George began petting Whiskers with his trembling hands. "I missed you, old friend," George said through tears. "I missed you so much." Whiskers licked George's hand. Then he looked into George's face, as if saying, "I missed you too." For 30 minutes, the pair stayed together. George talked to Whiskers, telling him how much he loved him. "Whiskers, when I'm gone, stay with Aunt Helen, okay? She'll take good care of you." Whiskers meowed as if he understood. When visiting time was up, Helen wanted to take Whiskers away. But George pleaded, "Please, let him stay a little longer." Susan allowed it. "Whiskers can stay a bit longer." George held Whiskers' paw. "You're my best friend," he said. "I'll never forget you." That night, while George slept, Whiskers stayed by his side. The scene was so moving that even the seasoned ICU staff found themselves wiping away tears. Nurse Amy, who had worked in intensive care for 15 years, later said, "In all my years here, I've never seen such pure love between a human and an animal. It was like watching two souls saying goodbye." Dr. Hamilton, who had initially been reluctant to allow the visit, found himself deeply affected. Sometimes medicine isn't just about treating the body, he reflected. Sometimes it's about healing the spirit. As the night wore on, Whiskers never moved from his position next to George. The cat seemed to understand that this time was precious and limited. Every so often, George would stir slightly, and Whiskers would gently purr, as if reassuring his human friend that he wasn't alone. The next morning, George's condition deteriorated further. The doctors said there was nothing more they could do. George could pass today or tomorrow, Dr. Hamilton told Helen. George's consciousness was coming and going. But during his lucid moments, he always looked for Whiskers. Susan allowed Whiskers to remain by George's side. He shouldn't be alone in his final days, she said. Whiskers sat by the edge of George's bed, watching carefully as George breathed. That afternoon, George opened his eyes for the last time. He saw Whiskers and tried to smile. "Whiskers, you came," he whispered. George reached out his hand and petted Whiskers' head. "I love you so much," he said. Whiskers licked George's hand. Then he rested his head on George's chest. At 6 p.m., George took his last breath. He closed his eyes while holding Whiskers' paw. Whiskers understood that George's breathing had stopped. He remained motionless for a while. Then very slowly, he sniffed George's face. The nurses were crying. They had never seen such devotion. When Helen came to collect Whiskers, the cat refused to leave. He didn't want to be separated from George. "Come on, Whiskers, let's go home," Helen said. But Whiskers hid under George's bed. The moment of George's passing was peaceful, surrounded by love. As his breathing slowed and finally stopped, Whiskers seemed to understand what was happening. The cat didn't cry out or become agitated. Instead, he simply rested his head more firmly against George's chest, as if trying to feel the last beats of his beloved friend's heart. Susan, who had witnessed many deaths in her years as an ICU nurse, was struck by the dignity of the moment. It was beautiful, she later told her colleagues. George wasn't alone. He had his best friend with him. The hospital staff gave George and Whiskers a few more minutes alone together before beginning the necessary procedures. Even in death, George's hand seemed to rest protectively near Whiskers, a final gesture of their unbreakable bond. That night, Whiskers stayed at the hospital. Helen tried to take him, but the cat resisted strongly. The nurses allowed Whiskers to stay for one night. "We'll take him tomorrow," Susan said. "Tonight he probably doesn't want to leave George alone." But Amy, the night shift nurse, noticed something strange. Around midnight, Whiskers suddenly stood up and began walking in the corridor. Whiskers stopped in front of room 314 and meowed. In that room, 78-year-old heart patient Mr. Miller was lying. Amy was curious. "What is Whiskers doing there?" she thought. After waiting for 10 minutes in front of room 314, Whiskers went to room 322. He did the same thing there. At 2 a.m., Whiskers stopped in front of room 301. Here he stayed much longer, constantly meowing. Amy noted the cat's strange behavior. Maybe he's just looking for George, she thought. But when she came to the morning shift, she received shocking news. The patient in room 301, Mr. Johnson, had died at 4 a.m. It must be a coincidence, Amy told herself. But the same thing happened the next night. The behavior was so unusual that Amy decided to document it carefully. She noted the exact times Whiskers visited each room, how long he stayed, and the intensity of his meowing. Room 301 had received the longest visit, nearly an hour of the cat sitting quietly outside the door, occasionally letting out soft, almost mournful meows. When Amy learned of Mr. Johnson's death the following morning, a chill ran down her spine. Mr. Johnson had been stable when she last checked on him at 11 p.m. There had been no indication that he was declining rapidly. Could a cat really sense death approaching? Amy wondered. She had heard old wives' tales about animals predicting death, but she had always dismissed them as superstition. Now she wasn't so sure. Amy decided to share her observations with the day shift supervisor. "I know this sounds crazy," she began, "but I think George's cat might have some kind of ability." The supervisor, Margaret, was initially skeptical. "Animals sometimes act strangely in hospitals," she said. "The smells, the sounds, it's not their natural environment." But Amy was insistent. This wasn't just strange behavior. It was purposeful. Deliberate. Like Whiskers knew something we didn't. On the second night, Whiskers exhibited the same behavior again. This time, night shift nurse Mark was on duty. Mark noticed that Whiskers visited specific rooms and spent particularly long time in front of room 318. In 318, an elderly lady, Margaret Foster, was lying. She was a cancer patient and her condition was serious. In the morning, Margaret Foster had died. Mark reported this coincidence to Susan. "Whiskers seems to know which patients are on their last nights." Susan initially didn't believe it. "Cats don't do such things, Mark. It's just coincidence." But on the third night, Susan observed it herself. Whiskers again toured specific rooms. This time he spent the longest time in front of room 309. In 309, elderly Mr. Thomas was lying. He had suffered a stroke. The next morning, they found Mr. Thomas dead. Now Susan was beginning to suspect too. This cannot be coincidence. On the fourth night, Susan, Amy, and Mark followed Whiskers together. The cat went straight to room 325 and stayed there for hours. "Who's in 325? Susan asked. "An elderly lady, heart patient," Amy said. In the morning, that lady had also died. It was now clear that this couldn't be coincidence. Whiskers was somehow selecting patients who were about to die. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Whiskers would begin his rounds at approximately 11 p.m. each night. He would walk slowly through the corridors of the terminal care wing, pausing briefly at some doors, completely ignoring others. But there would always be one or two rooms where he would settle for extended periods, sometimes sitting vigil for hours. Susan began keeping detailed records. She noted that Whiskers seemed to prefer patients who were alone, those without family members staying overnight. It was as if the cat understood that these people needed companionship in their final hours. "He's not just predicting death," Susan realized. "He's providing comfort to the dying." Mark noticed something else. When Whiskers is with a patient who's about to pass, they seem more peaceful. Less agitated. This observation would prove crucial to understanding Whiskers' role. The cat wasn't just an omen of death, he was a comforter, a gentle presence to ease the transition from life to death. Dr. Hamilton, when informed of these observations, initially remained skeptical. "We're dealing with confirmation bias," he explained to Susan. "You're noticing the hits and ignoring the misses." But there were no misses. Over the course of 2 weeks, Whiskers had correctly identified 14 patients who would die within 24 hours of his visit. The statistical probability of this being coincidence was virtually zero. Susan reported the situation to Dr. Hamilton. "Doctor, there's a very strange situation. George's cat seems to know which patients are about to die." Dr. Hamilton initially didn't believe this. "Susan, this is impossible. Cats don't possess such abilities." "But he's been right 4 nights in a row." Dr. Hamilton, intrigued, observed Whiskers himself that night. The cat spent a long time in front of room 312. In 312, elderly Mr. Williams was lying. His condition appeared stable. But in the morning, Mr. Williams had unexpectedly died. Dr. Hamilton was shocked. How is this possible? When hospital director Dr. Patricia Mills learned of the situation, she was very surprised. It's hard to believe that a cat can sense death in advance. But the evidence was there. For 1 week, Whiskers had correctly predicted the deaths of 7 patients. Dr. Mills decided to research the situation. Maybe there's a scientific explanation for this. Whiskers' ability had become legendary among hospital staff. No one could understand how the cat did it. Maybe people who are about to die have a different smell, Dr. Hamilton suggested. Or maybe Whiskers senses changes in body temperature, Nurse Susan said. Dr. Mills was facing a dilemma. The story was bound to leak to the media eventually, and she needed to decide how to handle it. Should they allow Whiskers to continue his nightly rounds? Should they study him? Should they try to find him another home? The hospital's ethics committee was convened to discuss the situation. "We have a cat that appears to predict death with 100% accuracy," Dr. Mills explained to the committee. "The question is, what do we do with this information?" Some committee members were concerned about the psychological impact on patients and families. If people find out that the cat's presence means death is imminent, it could cause panic, argued Dr. Stevens, the chief of psychiatry. But others saw potential benefits. If Whiskers can give families advance warning, they can have time to prepare, to say goodbye, countered Dr. Martinez from palliative care. The debate continued for hours. Finally, they reached a decision: Whiskers would be allowed to continue his rounds, but under careful observation and documentation. If families requested it, Whiskers would be kept away from their loved ones' rooms. Dr. Mills invited veterinarian Dr. Ross to the hospital. They wanted to scientifically examine Whiskers' strange ability. "It's scientifically proven that some animals can sense death in advance," Dr. Ross said. "Especially cats have very developed senses of smell. So how is Whiskers making such accurate predictions? Chemical changes occur in the bodies of people who are about to die. Whiskers can sense these changes by smell." Dr. Mills began systematically recording Whiskers' behaviors. Every night, which rooms the cat visited and how long he stayed were noted. For 2 weeks, Whiskers correctly predicted the deaths of 14 patients. The error rate was still 0. "This cannot be statistically coincidental," Dr. Mills said. "Whiskers truly possesses a special ability." During this time, Whiskers continued to live at the hospital. Helen visited him every day, giving him food. But Whiskers didn't want to leave the hospital. "It's as if he has a mission here," Helen said. The hospital staff also began to love Whiskers. During the day, the cat behaved calmly and friendly. He only worked at night. Dr. Ross brought in colleagues from the veterinary school to study Whiskers. They conducted various tests, examining his sensory capabilities and brain activity. The results were fascinating. Whiskers' olfactory receptors are highly developed, even for a cat, explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a veterinary neurologist. But more interesting is his behavioral response to certain chemical signatures. The researchers discovered that dying patients emit specific pheromones and chemical compounds as their bodies begin to shut down. Most humans can't detect these subtle changes, but cats, with their superior sense of smell, can. "It's not supernatural," Dr. Walsh concluded. "It's biological. Whiskers has learned to associate certain scents with impending death." But the research revealed something else remarkable. Whiskers doesn't just detect death, Dr. Ross observed. He responds to it with compassion. That's the truly extraordinary part. When Whiskers' story leaked outside the hospital, local media showed great interest. "The cat who predicts death" became headline news. The Denver Post newspaper ran a special feature about Whiskers. Journalist Sarah Thompson came to the hospital to observe the cat's behavior. "This is extraordinary," Sarah said. "Whiskers seems like part of the hospital staff." Television channels also became interested. Major networks like CNN and CBS ran stories about the remarkable cat. At Riverside Hospital in Denver, a cat named Whiskers is correctly predicting which patients are about to die, reported the CNN anchor. This media attention sometimes caused problems. Some patients' families became anxious. "What happens if Whiskers comes to our room?" worried patients would ask. Dr. Mills had to explain the situation. Whiskers is just using his natural abilities. He's not the cause of illness, he's just sensing the result. But some families were disturbed by Whiskers' presence. "This cat is like a harbinger of death," they said. Dr. Mills faced a difficult decision: keep Whiskers at the hospital or send him away. The media attention brought both positive and negative reactions. Some people saw Whiskers as a blessing, a gentle creature providing comfort in final moments. Others viewed him with superstition and fear. Religious leaders weighed in on the phenomenon. Father Michael from the local Catholic Church said, "God works through all his creatures. If this cat can provide comfort to the dying and closure to families, then he's doing God's work." But Reverend Johnson from another denomination disagreed. We shouldn't attribute supernatural powers to animals. It borders on idolatry. The debate raged in local newspapers and on social media. #Whiskers the cat began trending on Twitter, with people sharing their own stories of pets who seemed to sense illness or death. Dr. Mills found herself fielding calls from reporters around the world. "How do you explain Whiskers' ability?" they would ask. "What does this mean for our understanding of animal intelligence?" Unexpectedly, Whiskers didn't just predict death. He also began providing moral support to patients and their families. Whiskers would spend hours with patients who were about to die. Most patients found comfort in the cat's presence. "When Whiskers is with me, I feel more at peace," said elderly patient Margaret Green. "It's like I'm not alone." Families were also affected by Whiskers' presence. "The cat coming here helped us understand that our mother's final hours were approaching," said one patient's relative. "So we had the chance to say goodbye to her." Dr. Mills now understood that Whiskers didn't just predict death, but also provided a valuable service to the hospital. "Whiskers gives families time to prepare," she said. "This is very valuable." The hospital administration decided to officially declare Whiskers a therapy cat. They even made him a special ID card. Helen accepted that it was best for Whiskers to stay at the hospital. If George could see that Whiskers is helping people here, he would be very happy. Whiskers' feeding and veterinary care began to be provided by the hospital. The cat was now officially an employee of Riverside Hospital. The transformation was remarkable. What had started as a mysterious phenomenon had evolved into a recognized form of therapy. Whiskers wasn't just predicting death, he was helping people face it with dignity and peace. Dr. Patricia Martinez, the hospital's new palliative care specialist, began working closely with Whiskers. In hospice care, we talk about good deaths, deaths where patients are comfortable, surrounded by love, and at peace. Whiskers seems to instinctively understand this concept. The cat's presence had a calming effect that went beyond his ability to predict death. Patients who had been agitated or fearful often became peaceful when Whiskers settled beside their beds. Family members found comfort in knowing their loved ones weren't alone. "He's like a furry chaplain," observed Chaplain Father Rodriguez, who had initially been skeptical of the cat's role. "I've seen him provide comfort that I, with all my theological training, couldn't offer." The hospital established protocols for Whiskers visits. Families could opt out if they preferred, and the cat's presence was always introduced gently. A special fund was created for his care, with donations pouring in from around the world. Whiskers' ability attracted international scientific attention. Dr. James Peterson from the University of California came to Denver to study Whiskers. "What Whiskers does is very important in animal behavior science," Dr. Peterson said. "If cats' ability to sense death in advance is scientifically proven, this could revolutionize medicine." Dr. Peterson studied Whiskers' behaviors for 2 months. He discovered that the cat selected patients not just through smell, but also through behavioral cues. Whiskers evaluates patients' breathing patterns, body movements, and even voice tones, Dr. Peterson said. These research results were published in the New England Journal of Medicine. The article titled "Feline Prediction of Terminal Illness" received great attention. Whiskers became famous not just in Denver, but worldwide. Journalists from Japan, Germany, and England came to see him. Throughout this fame process, Whiskers remained the same. He continued to do his duty every night and spent time with patients during the day. After 1 year, Whiskers had correctly predicted the deaths of over 150 patients. His accuracy rate was still 100%. The scientific community was divided on how to interpret Whiskers' abilities. Some researchers focused on the biological explanation, the cat's superior sensory capabilities allowing him to detect chemical changes in dying patients. Others were intrigued by the behavioral aspects. Whiskers shows empathy, noted Dr. Sarah Kim, an animal behaviorist from Harvard. He's not just detecting death, he's responding to it with compassion. That suggests a level of emotional intelligence we're only beginning to understand in animals. The research led to practical applications. Other hospitals began training therapy animals, though none matched Whiskers' uncanny accuracy. The Whiskers protocol was developed, guidelines for integrating animals into end-of-life care. Medical schools began including courses on animal-assisted therapy in their curricula. Whiskers showed us that healing isn't just about medicine, explained Dr. Peterson. Sometimes it's about presence, comfort, and connection. 2 years had passed. Whiskers was now an integral part of Riverside Hospital. The hospital had even created a special room for him. Whiskers' story was turned into a book. The Cat Who Knew became a bestseller. The proceeds were donated to animal shelters. Other hospitals started Whiskers programs. Specially trained cats began working as therapy cats in hospitals. Whiskers showed the importance of animal-assisted therapy, Dr. Mills said. Now many hospitals have cats working there. Whiskers' story affected not just the medical world, but society as well. People began to appreciate animals' intelligence and intuitive powers more. A special monument was erected at George's grave. It read, "George Patterson and Whiskers, Eternal Friendship." Helen visited George's grave every month, telling him about Whiskers' latest condition. "If only George knew how special Whiskers was," she would say. When Whiskers turned 14, he began to age a little. But he still continued his duties. "Even if Whiskers wanted to retire, we couldn't separate him from here," Nurse Susan said. "He's now part of the hospital family." The impact of Whiskers' story extended far beyond Riverside Hospital. Animal shelters reported increased adoptions of older cats, with people specifically requesting Whiskers-like companions. The story had changed public perception of cats from aloof pets to empathetic healers. International conferences on animal-assisted therapy now regularly featured sessions on the Whiskers phenomenon. Veterinary schools developed specialized programs to identify and train animals with similar sensitivities. A documentary film about Whiskers, titled The Final Companion, won several awards and was translated into dozens of languages. The film followed families who had experienced Whiskers' presence during their loved ones' final hours, sharing their stories of comfort and closure. If Whiskers' incredible journey from a grieving companion to a healing presence touched your heart, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. This remarkable cat proved that sometimes the most profound healing comes from the simplest acts of love and presence. Ring the notification bell so you never miss these extraordinary true stories that remind us of the powerful bonds between humans and animals. Share your own stories of pets who provided comfort during difficult times in the comments below. Every story of love and loyalty deserves to be remembered.